My name is Antti. I come from Helsinki, Finland. I work in our own company, Flova, as a coach. I'm a software developer by background. Yeah, we had really fun time last night in the banquet. Yeah, that was really, really nice. Thanks for everybody for the company. Yeah, and I'm here to talk about beliefs and assumptions and changing them, letting go of the old ones and starting new ones. And I really like this picture. And for me, it depicts everything when everything is going well, when you have worked with the customer and the users for 2 days, and after the 2 days you have a working prototype of a mobile app which kind of makes sense for everybody, and you know what you're going to build for the next 2 months or whatever, and everybody's very excited. And it also kind of depicts me if you're working with a team of developers, product owners, and whatever, and help the customer to kind of throw away the most of the product backlog, because together you realize that, well, actually we don't know if we need all that shit to be built, and then you can go on and have the first release in 2 weeks. Like, that's agile as we know it, when we have experienced it. And that's the kind of new way of working with software and knowledge work that we all love. But then we go to an organization that is used to a different kind of working. And we start to talk about all the same things and the unicorns and everything. And they don't understand. And we might feel like Galileo Galilei defending his case for the Catholic Church that actually the Earth orbits around the sun and not the vice versa. And it's actually the beliefs that people in the organization have that makes it very natural for them to not believe that with these kind of new, unintuitive ways of working, you could actually achieve something meaningful. And yesterday, Michael Sahota was talking about the version 1 study, resistance to change, inability to change company culture. For me, it boils down to beliefs and assumptions. And, well, Olaf Lewis said that blaming culture it's the blame game, it's a labeling game. But for me, Edgar Sein's model of what culture is consisted of makes very much sense. In the surface, we see the practices, how the people are working, what they are doing. Under the surface, if you ask the people, like, why you're doing things in that way, you can get stories about values, of what they believe in and what they believe that works and so on. But actually under that, it's something unconscious that cannot be, even most of the times, we cannot say all the things that we believe in. They are unconscious. But they are the strongest foundation of our culture. What we believe in, what our assumptions are. And if we are not able to change the beliefs and assumptions, it's like the theme of this conference. It's just seeming and doing agile, not being agile. So I'm going to talk about, from my perspective, how we can invite people to let go of those old beliefs and build new ones. Because that's, for me, is essential if we want to change how people in an organization work and how we can get to the new paradigm of knowledge work that we like to call lean or agile or whatever. And for me, a little bit of my background, because I think this is quite interesting because before I worked with software. I worked with learning games for kids. I was in a research and design unit, Agora Game Lab in the University of Jyväskylä in Finland. And it's over 10 years ago now. And we developed games for kids to help them learn subjects from natural science. And in there, the problem was the same. When we collaborated with science teachers, they told us that the biggest hurdle that kept the kids from learning was their beliefs and assumptions that come from their everyday lives and what they see every day, that conflict with the assumptions and beliefs you have in natural science. And let me give you an example. And here's a pretty simple question. Do you know what causes the seasons? Why there's winter and summer? Let's hear how a group of recent graduates from a university in US describe us what they think. Oh. Yeah, I hope. We tested it, it's work.
Causes of the seasons is a topic taught in every standard curriculum.
Okay, I think the seasons happen because as the Earth travels around the sun, it gets nearer to the sun, which produces warmer weather, and gets farther away, which produces colder weather, and hence the seasons.
How hot it is or how cold it is at any given time of the year has to do with the closeness of the Earth to the sun during the seasonal periods.
The Earth goes around the sun, and it gets hotter when we get closer to the sun, and it gets colder when we get further away from the sun.
So basically they all had the same answer. In the summer, when the Earth orbits the sun, in the summer it gets closer to the sun, and in the winter it gets farther away. And well, we might laugh at the Americans now because they elected Trump and whatever. But actually, when I was asked this out of the cold in 15 years ago, I was like, what's the right answer? Yeah, I'm not sure. But actually, yeah, and why that doesn't make sense is if I think about Christmas in Finland, it's really cold, but in Australia it's pretty hot, so it cannot be that the northern hemisphere is away from the sun or farther away and the southern hemisphere is closer. But actually it's because of the axial tilt of the Earth. And this is an example of many misconceptions in natural sciences that people can have because they just intuitively think about something. So the axial tilt, if you're wondering, it works like once a year you rotate, the Earth rotates around the sun, and the axial tilt is the same, and the degree in which the sun's rays hit the atmosphere, it denotes how many of those are deflected, and how many of those get into the atmosphere and warm it. So the straighter the line is, the warmer the weather, and yeah, hence the seasons. Yeah, but we were dealing with these kind of misconceptions and false beliefs and trying to help them. Kids help them to get away from them. I'll get back to that in a while, but then back to knowledge work. I'll describe you 3 beliefs that I think are the most important ones that we need to let go of to really be agile. And I think we have enough people here so that we can do this in a fun way. I hope you agree. So in a stand-up comedy show, if you have been in one, if the comedian asks a question like, who is here from Kiev? You answer by, if you are from Kiev, you clap. Let's try it. Who's from Kiev? So as I go and describe these beliefs, these legacy beliefs, please start clapping if you recognize that, oh, this company I was in, it was kind of like that, or even when I used to be kind of 10 years ago, I believed that, because these are all beliefs that are very natural. So let me know by clapping if you know what I'm talking about. So help me out, please. Okay, so first belief, batch thinking and focus on resource efficiency, meaning that we clump together big batches of work and deploy them at once to lower the costs and keep people 100% utilized to lower the costs. And that's so stupid, right? Nobody does it. I have to admit that as short time ago, as 6 months ago, I was using batch thinking on handling my receipts, expense receipts to my company, to the accountant. I would just devote 1 day of a month, try to devote 1 day of a month, because I hated that. And use that to kind of deal with all the batch of expenses and scan them and send them to my accountant. And you know, it didn't really work. I kept delaying it. I was always late. I hated it. And kind of like doing it as a batch didn't help at all. But that's what we've learned from factories, that in software development we do also. If deployment is costly, or if QA work is costly, we develop a bunch of features, a large bunch, and deploy them at once. Nobody has that happened? Yeah? and because we save, we do kind of bi-yearly releases. And the real cost of that, the hidden cost, is of course the ability to adapt to changes, the unknown unknowns that was talked about. And if we combine that with keeping people 100% utilized in planned work and extreme specialization of the people who are working, so we want the business analysts only doing analysis work, and the developers only doing development work, and QAs only doing QA work. And we are having batch of work for the business analyst, and when they're done with the requirements, they toss it over to coders. And of course, because we want to keep them 100% utilized, they get another project to analyze. And because that's efficient, right? But in fact, what's the trade-off cost is you don't transfer information, you don't collaborate, you don't have any shared understanding what you're building. And because you are specializing in your specialized work and you're not supposed to communicate, right? So this is, I think, the basic one, but still I see it every day, so I think it's worth mentioning. Second, this is my favorite, process rollout positivism. And I mean by that, that management can design new processes and roll them out into the organization, and that will actually change the work done into the organization according to the process that they designed. And all will be going smoothly. Yeah. And of course, this is the Finnish specialty. We have the most organization restructurings per year, per companies. And the belief is that if you change the organization chart, the reality will change accordingly. And I'd like to say that I haven't been guilty of this anyway. But when I think of sometimes like 5-10 years ago, helping in other teams where I wasn't a member, kind of selling them the idea of cross-functional teams and just doing the Scrum practices, I don't think that's much better. Because that's just structure and processes. If you're just saying that you should do these kind of meetings, and then you ain't got to have this kind of team structure, I think that's quite as bad. Because, of course, what this is based off is dividing the organization into management, thinkers, and doers. And it might work in factories somewhat, but in knowledge work, of course, it doesn't work because the people doing the work know the most about what works. So the people, management people designing the processes and hierarchies actually make suboptimal decisions, and in the same time, they will demotivate the people doing the work because they feel no ownership about decisions of how should we work. Okay, so the last one, and yeah, the belief that the best and only thing to motivate people and keep them committed is carrot and stick. And surely nobody believes in this. Well, I have a 7-year-old daughter, and well, I've read a lot about how kids learn and psychology and whatever, but still, I sometimes resort to carrot and stick just out of habit and old beliefs. Like, for example, this is her bike. 2 years ago, I tried to help her learn to ride a bicycle, and I found out that actually for a kid, practicing something that you are really not good at, it's pretty frustrating and demotivating. So I had to kind of, I couldn't motivate her, so I made up a system of that she would get a sticker every time she would practice, and when she got 10 stickers, we would go to an amusement park or whatever. So basic carrot thing. And another thing, kind of during evenings, on bedtimes, trying to help her know the cause and effect, saying that if you brush your teeth very quickly and put your nightie on, then maybe we have time for more bedtime stories. And sometimes I phrase it like a threat, that if you are not fast enough, there will be no stories. And immediately I see the negative effect, like she's kind of discouraged and panicking. But still I do it sometimes. And companies can have it the same. The illusion of control that you have in command and control. Stephen Parry talks about command and hope organizations because that's only an illusion of control. Trying to have incentivized metrics like test code coverage. Well, I've seen unit tests with no asserts that just run the code to keep the coverage up. You can game any system, and people end up gaming systems if they have this kind of command and control setting. And they game the system, and the ones who are actually intrinsically motivated about doing the work and making an impact, they feel demotivated about having to game the system, to thrive in the system. So I think it's based on the self-perception of people who are making these kind of systems. They think that they themselves are weak-willed, lazy, and will cheat, so they think that the others are too. And it's like there was a prohibition of alcohol in Finland in close to 100 years ago, and it was kind of started by working class people who wanted to kind of educate the whole working class and make them rise instead of drinking lots of alcohol, get educated, get better jobs, and get better future for their kids. They would then they were actually believing that the working class people were lazy and weak-willed, so they wanted a prohibition, but actually it turned out it made things worse in the long run, because now we are not drinking beer, we are drinking vodka, so it didn't work out that well. So, how to get rid of these kind of beliefs? And going back to the work I did with the teachers on the kids, the teachers found out that lecturing, textbooks, telling things logically doesn't usually work. So we had to find another way. And we were developing games, and we experimented with a lot of things. We came up with this framework, and it's with 3 parts. The first is experience. Having kids play a game where they can experience phenomena that's according to the belief that they are kind of learning about, but it's distanced from the reality. We had animal characters, simulation, whatever, so that it doesn't connect with the matter, subject matter that they are studying, so that they can immerse in it in a safe environment and in a motivated environment, and have an experience of how that this belief works. And after that, we did a facilitated reflection together. So before the game, we didn't teach them anything. It was just an experience and then a reflection of how the game went, what tactics worked, and what did they realize happened. So that reinforced their experience because they listened to other kids explaining the same things that they saw. So there started connections forming in the brain related to the new belief that they found out, oh, this tactics works. And as the last thing after that, just after that, we kind of applied those ideas that they have and those experiences, those conclusions that they have had to the subject matter. So that only after that they would connect it to science, natural science. And in that way they had already formed connections in their brains. They had the experience, they had the reinforcement from their peers, and then the new belief had a possibility to be strong, as strong as the old one, because the old one, of course, it has more connections in the brain, and the more connections you have to one idea, the more surely it will stick. So that's why logic doesn't work, because it's not connected to any previous experience. That's why experience is important. So how to do the same for knowledge work and what I've used. And the games I've used, if you're a coach, you probably know them all, but I'll describe them shortly and I'll describe how I facilitate them. And it's the basic idea. We always start with experience. We don't tell any of the theory before we play those games. We start with the experience and then a reflection and then application. First is the marshmallow challenge. Who knows the marshmallow challenge? A couple. So it's a team design exercise by Tom Vucic, and it's 18 minutes, and you, as a team, build as high a structure you can from spaghetti sticks, string, and tape, and that can support a marshmallow. And yeah, it's quite fun, it's quite quick. And what happens when we play it? The experience is like people find out that actually there are unknown unknowns for them the first time they play it. They think they know all the materials, but there are kind of surprises there. And they find out, usually they plan like 12 minutes, then construct like 4 minutes, and then they try to deploy the marshmallow. And then they have a surprise moment when the material doesn't work as they expected. And then they find that this planning approach didn't work here because it was more complex problem than that they thought. And when we reflect them and talk about it, they talk about, oh, there were more risks than anticipated. And then we lead with a question like, okay, what similar experiences do you have in your work? So that they can connect that to their work life. What kind of unknown unknowns are there in work? And then you can continue on, okay, when you have this kind of uncertainty, what would be a good tactic to use? And then you can go on to talk about experiments and spikes and whatever. But the important thing is to have the experience first, because that's the anchor, that's the shared story that the group can use to talk about that it's important to tackle uncertainty in their work. So the second, and this I use for tackling the belief of 100% utilization. It's the multitasking name game by Henrik Nyberg. Who knows it? A bit more? Yeah. So it's a basic game of multitasking and limiting WIP. One person is a coder and he can write, and then there are 5 customers who want their name written down. And in the first round, you are multitasking, the coder is multitasking, trying to satisfy every need at the same time. And in the second round, there's a WIP limit of 1. And we take time, and we end up with a graph like this. How much time does it take to write 5 names? And actually, part of the game is asking beforehand them to estimate how much time it would take to write 1 name and 5 names, and what are the kind of things that affect that time estimation. And what happens is that, well, people think that this is rigged. Of course it is, and it's just stupid. Of course it is. And then the customers might think how long it's going to take, and in the second round, oh, finally a sensible way to do it. But then in reflection, we go back to this graph and ask them which graph resembles their own work that they do. And for most, it's the uppermost one. They are multitasking. And then we ask why. And then there'll be kind of justifications. It's just the way our work goes and everything. And somebody might talk about customer experience. But then we can get to the application. How could we reduce our work in progress? And this is all based on the experience and the graph that allows this discussion to be meaningful for them. Okay. Next one, for the process rollout positivism, the ball flow game. Who knows it? Okay, much more. So it's about making a process to process those balls in as fast as possible and a good quality, and the team can make its own work process and then iterate and make it better during the retrospectives after iterations. And what happens is that there are some things. For example, people see that practice made us better in our current process, and then at some point they see that, oh, no further improvement in working this kind of way is going to get us better. We have to change how we work to get better. And then they might try something else, a new kind of process, and they might fail the first time. And they might continue with that and make some tweaks and then succeed, or they might go back and not try that again. And usually in the first rounds, somebody says that let's do it like this, and the others kind of agree, but they don't understand, and then there's a mayhem. And then based on this, when we reflect this, if there's a confusion, we can stress the point that everybody must understand how and why the process works like it works. And you need discussion, communication to do that. And actually all the improvements, for example, from retrospectives, they are experiments. You don't know if they will work or not before you try them. And usually you might have to persist with them after the earlier failure. Because you can make them work, it demands learning. And to improve, you need to change how do you do things, not just work harder, you need to work smarter. And then we can go to the application of what does this mean in practice for us. How can we get shared understanding of our working agreements, and how can we experiment our ways of working together. Just to end with the last one, this was about the motivation, and I had a really hard time kind of like, do I have something for intrinsic motivation? But then I found out, oh, I've already done this, but I haven't written it about it yet. So this is the first time anybody will hear about this kind of game. I call it motivation storytelling. So it's moving motivators plus storytelling. So to kind of combat the belief that only extrinsic motivators, character and stick work, we can tell stories like this using the moving motivator cards, that everyone picks a moving motivator card that he likes, that is a strong one for them, and then tells a story about recent past, about how that motivator motivated them to learn or do something more. And then you get these stories, and then you can reflect on what kind of stories did we have as a team, as a company, as a unit, and then find out what's the common ones, what are the ones that we want to amplify, and maybe come to a realization that maybe, okay, it might be that they were all extrinsic ones, but usually when people talk about themselves, they find out that it's more the intrinsic ones that motivate them. So those were my ideas that I've used. Just to conclude, the assumptions and beliefs are what hold us back. And I found it out myself, even though I constantly learn new things, my own beliefs hold me back, and that's true for other people too. And I believe that for assumptions, for inviting people to change their assumptions, you need to start with the experience, not with the theory. Because if you go with the theory, you will get more resistance from the people, because it will clash with their existing beliefs, and they will kind of resist, that doesn't work. So you need to start with the experience. So this was my contribution, my talk. I think we have 2 minutes for questions, and if you would like to help me and our Scrum Master or team coach, we are talking about this concept of peer support community online. Please check the link. Yeah. Thank you.
Antti, as you mentioned before, you were software developer, but at which point you started coaching, and what helped you on this way?
I have a tendency of always looking at the bigger picture. So even when I was a software developer, I liked talking with the product guys and the management guys to understand why we are doing the stuff we are doing. So I think I've always been kind of doing coaching type of things, but then gradually I kind of got more into it, and yeah, there's no kind of that point of time that I started or kind of changed from coder to a coach. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question. So you put a very interesting point about trust, yeah? So slide was that some businessmen think that people are cheating them if they're not controlling them. So this is a complete truth, and I face it all the time when especially doing transformations. How do these exercises, how do these games can help with that? That, for instance, a business owner who give you money, who wants to be agile, if each 5 minutes request a report, visibility, dashboard, when he is disconnected, when he is located in HQ, which is far away from a development center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very hard, because I think you need the best I can offer is kind of sharing stories about motivation that I talked about, and if the manager is away and not available, you cannot do that. So it's very hard Yeah, we can discuss that in more detail, but short answer is I have no quick fixes. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, let's.
Shall we organize a moving motivator storytelling today? I have 10 decks.
Let's do it. Yeah. Thanks.
Let's applause.